what we do in aeronautics. So thank you much.
You are
And I
welcome.
want to welcome all to the part of the agenda where we'll treat you to discussion from panels from senior leaders and technical experts exploring leadership and innovation across the exciting aviation enterprise. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our speakers using Conferences IO, which you can access from the QR code, as well as the link that you're going to find in YouTube chat. Um, Boy, we've had over 2,300 of our colleagues that have registered to participate in this year's imaginAviation. And frankly, there are hundreds of additional folks that are joining us at this event at over 80 watch parties that we have from around the world. Um, we're also joined this year by our graphic artist. I should say, joined again this year by our graphic artist, Joe Byrne of See Your Words, who will be capturing thoughts and images over the next 3 days to tell the story of imaginAviation 2024. Joe has already taken some of your hopes for the event that you have told us about during registration and put them to images. So I hope we're going to be able to meet your expectations and explore the agenda together. So now let's get started. I want to welcome our opening panel discussion at this year's imaginAviation. That's titled "How Ideas Become Reality" and where those ideas come from. This is fundamentally a conversation around innovation and how it changes our world. So for the next hour, we're going to have a conversation on how we innovate. Um, and as we innovate, how do we use those innovations to transform aviation? We have three accomplished panelists that we will discuss their views on what this all means and how we can get more ideas to become reality. So let me introduce them now. Um, and I'm going to hesitate a little bit because I know we were, much like we were looking for Orville a few minutes ago, John Tilko, Chief Innovation Officer from Aurora Flight Sciences, had yet to join the panel, but hopefully he will join us for his comments and contributions and discussion as we go. But we also have Shayla Torres Nieves, Associate Professor and Director, the Center for Aerospace and Unmanned Systems Engineering. She's from the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez. And we also have John Marinaro, Vice President of Fleet Operations of Torque Robotics. John is actually a retired NASA executive. So good morning to all. And what I'd like to do now, I'd like to start by asking each of you to say a little bit more about your background. I gave nothing more than your titles, and there's so much more to you that I think our audience here would love to hear. But then I want to ask you to share some thoughts on a particular question of food for thought that I want to pose. So, Shayla, let me start with you. Um, Again, after you say a little bit more about yourself, I'd like you to reflect on the thought that sometimes discovery and innovation can be very isolating. We sometimes think that innovation is spawned from that solitary genius. I think the best innovators are open minded and curious about everything and collaborating. So, how do we foster such teamwork and organizational culture? So, please share some thoughts if you would, Shayla.
So, hello everyone. Again, I'm Sheila Torres. I'm a professor at the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez. I also lead the Center for Aerospace and Unmanned Systems Engineering. This is an interdisciplinary center affiliated to the College of Engineering. Briefly about myself, my background is as a mechanical engineer. All my bachelor's degree, master's, and PhD degrees are the diplomas all say mechanical engineering. I am an experimentalist by training, focusing on fluid dynamics, particularly on aerodynamics, turbulence, and boundary layers for aerospace applications and for renewable energy. After I finished my PhD, I went on to work on industry. I worked on compression systems aerodynamics for an engine manufacturer. I led commercial engine projects and test rigs that were actually conducted at NASA's wind tunnels. And about 9 years ago, I became a member of academia. In terms of innovation myself, while I was in graduate school, I worked on co founding a startup that develops innovative technologies to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy. And through that startup, we were able to patent some of our ideas. In academia now, I wear different hats, and I'm gonna address the question about how innovation can be an isolating process. I wear different hats as an educator. I teach graduate and undergraduate courses in mechanical engineering and in a minor in aerospace sciences and engineering that we offer. As a researcher, I perform research and lead a team of students. And as an administrator, I'm the main point of contact at UPRM for Aerospace Matters. I'm also a board member of the Puerto Rico Aerospace Technology Consortium. I lead the development currently of a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering at UPRM. And in terms of research and infrastructure, I lead two uh, emblematic projects. One is Turbo Lab, that's a center of excellence sponsored by Pratt and Whitney. It's the first in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. And this collaboration is mainly driven by the need to have a highly trained workforce and reduce the trailing time once they're hired. Um, to give you a little bit of context, in Puerto Rico, in Pratt and Whitney, Puerto Rico, RM alumni. So we've built a strong partnership with them in building this center. So far, we've received 1 point for establishing laboratories, getting instrumentation, and leading a program where we're trying to be innovative
We're
in.
trying to be innovative.
Oh, I got some feedback. We're trying to be innovative on how we can merge the interests of industry with something that might be appealing to researchers, which would be through research projects used as a platform to train our students. Um, and there's innovation there not only by using research projects as a training tool, but there's innovation as well, at least in the context of our institution, in the sense of getting funds from the private industry, to build facilities and to develop these types of projects. The other project is the Aerospace Institute for Research. We receive funds to develop a research center for aerospace projects that's funded through NIST. And there's innovation there, not only in the sense that it's the first time in our institution where we get funds for permanent improvements in infrastructure, but also there's innovation as to how we're setting up the laboratories as collaborative spaces and not as researchers. Our institution are more used to having their own laboratory and their own equipment, and we're looking into collaborative spaces that requires innovation and a culture change. I do agree that innovation can be very isolating, um, but I strongly believe that innovation is a social process. um, so I want to stress the importance of fostering innovation in all areas, and not only technically and in fundamental research, but in my perspective as an academic, in curriculum development, in fostering entrepreneurship and commercialization among our students. And even though it's an isolating process in practice, we need that social process, that openness to share ideas, to have discussions. And to be honest, typically this type of innovation is met somewhat with pushback because of either lack of resources, lack of time. But if we look into it, it really comes down to a lack of commitment to the actual process of innovation. Time is needed for innovation to flourish. So I put together, and John, you tell me if I'm still good on time. Um,
Yeah, take
but
another minute to share some of those final thoughts. Then I want to go to John, John Marinaro for some of his views as well.
Excellent. Yeah. So I think that it's necessary not only to value innovation, but to empower it, incentivize innovation in academia. It's very common to have a lot of technologies that are developed and stay in the labs, and are never commercialized. Try to understand why, try to incentivize the researchers, and perhaps provide the administrative support that is needed so that the researcher can actually focus on the idea, and then have a team that would help in taking that out of the classroom. Work with the intellectual property policies to try to be more inclusive and appealing for researchers. I believe partnerships with industry, government, understanding your market for the technology that you're developing is key, and starting young. For me, that's very important. We have programs, we have a Shark Tank at our institution where we incentivize students to create new ideas and create a path to guide them through innovation.
Wonderful. I love your expression that innovation is inherently a social process. I think that's something for us to think about in terms of how we foster that across our enterprise. So thank you very much. Uh, John Marinaro, let me turn to you now. Again, a few minutes on your background, but then if you could talk a little bit about innovation in operations. I know that is a large part of your background, your current role. Again, bringing innovation to the markets, not just about being ready to innovate, but also about the willingness to accept that innovation. In roles that you have filled in prior work, you've had to face a lack of willingness at times to accept innovation. Users don't necessarily love change for change's sake. So, how do we tailor innovation to specific customers, users, and audiences? If you could share a little bit of that along with your background, I think we'd all love to hear that.
Okay, thanks. Hopefully everybody's hearing me okay. So,
Sound great.
yeah, the first of all, I'd like to say that I'm excited to be back at NASA. It's been about 7 years since I retired, but by and large, my entire life has been about service. 23 years serving in 3 branches of the armed forces in aviation. That was the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Army National Guard. 26 years in government service at FAA and NASA, where I led the development of air traffic control safety systems and runway incursion reduction technology in the 90s. And then my NASA career, which focused on independent verification and validation for critical software. I got to serve as the executive director of the NASA Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel. And then in the wake of the Space Shuttle Columbia mishap, and then up to the Safety Center in Cleveland, where we created what I affectionately called the NASA University for Safety. I tried to retire twice. I haven't figured that out very well. Maybe one day I will, but I did a stint with the government services contractor, a friend of mine's company, where we supported NASA, the Fed Reserve, and the EPA. And we did a merger and acquisition, which is an interesting process. During COVID, Torque Robotics found me. They were looking for somebody to lead operations and safety for on-road testing of autonomous vehicles. And we're in partnership with Daimler Trucks North America, which owns Freightliner. So, my life has been all about innovation and operations, and happy to answer your question, John. I look at probably I have many examples where there was some unwillingness to adopt the innovation or to accept the change. 2 that I'll focus on. One was at NASA. If you go back to the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, you'll see a reference in there that NASA wasn't as credible or competent as it should be. And I spent the rest of my career trying to engineer that out of ever being said in an accident investigation again. When we put what we call STEP, or the NASA University for Safety, together, one of the things we had to our advantage and was very innovative was some lecture capture technology. Today, it's in almost every classroom. But if you go back to 2010, it was new technology. And what we had the ability to do was to take a lecture much like this and to capture it along with the PowerPoints and graphics and your video and audio. And we could almost instantly walk out of the classroom or the lecture and host it on NASA's learning system, the Saturn learning system. Not sure if that's what it is today or not, but and our goal was to really take all of the lectures from subject matter experts around the agency and safety, because you really couldn't go get an advanced degree in safety, and to host them. And what I heard from most of the senior subject matter experts was, you can't teach my class online. Well, step level one when I got there was 25 modules and 120 hours. And I said, if we try to deploy this, we won't have one graduate in 2 years. What we did was we rehosted that into 25 modules that were introductory, 1 hour lessons each. We figured we'd get into the depth of the knowledge later on in higher levels. And by the time we deployed it 9 months later, we had over 250 graduates on day one from our beta testing. The other one I'll go to is torque. From time to time, we hear that autonomous vehicles will put drivers out of work in the commercial industry. Today, there's about a 60,000 driver shortage estimated by the American Trucking Association. There's no way we're going to put them out of business. The shortage is disrupting the supply chain. It's disrupting economics. And our goal is really to supplement the driver shortage and to try to improve the situation. We believe it'll bridge the gap. If you look at the crashes out there today, vehicle crashes are one of the leading top 10 causes. So we hope to make it safer with our autonomous vehicles. They can be used 24/7, so we'll increase the utilization. And the other thing that the autonomy can see, 360 degrees around the vehicle continuously with near real-time reaction time. So we believe that it's going to be safer. It won't get tired. It'll drive courteous and conservative. So, at the end of the day, we're not going to replace the drivers. We're just going to augment them and make it safer. So I'll kind of stop there.
No, that's great. Thank you. And so as I'm listening to both of you, I'm just struck by the fact that, yes, you built your remarks and your career and advancements on a strong tech base and scientific base, but the kind of challenges that you were talking about that you face now are almost assuming the technology, but addressing the larger challenge of people and culture. So when I think about what we are fundamentally here trying to do at NASA and NASA Aeronautics, I think about trying to transform aviation, do that through innovation. So when you think of a transformational innovation applied to aero, what does that mean to you in terms of how we get there, and even what that may mean in terms of the innovations we need to bring? I mean, either of you, John or Shayla, any thoughts on that?
I'll let Shayla go first, and I've got a couple examples that I'll throw out, and we can go one way or the other from that.
Okay.
Sounds good. When we hear transformational, we think about changing the way we live drastically, right? Changing culturally, changing from the fundamentals. I believe with the even more aggressive and stringent restrictions that's been put on in the aeronautical industry, a transformational innovation is certainly relevant. I don't believe we're at the point where we can say that the innovation is to that point where we would transform how it operates today. But we already understand the need to innovate and change the way we think. John Kavlowski, you did mention the stressing not only the technical aspect, but the other aspects of innovation. And before, for the other question, I did mention that it's important to start young. And by starting young, what I meant, and I can provide an example for that, we make efforts to make sure to bring the innovation process to our students, even from a technical side. I did mention the Shark Tank competition that we have that's led by the Center for Aerospace and Unmanned Systems Engineering that I lead. And we ask our students, it's sponsored by L3Harris, we ask our students to bring innovative ideas that could be commercialized in certain topics in the aerospace industry. And honestly, the focus, yes, they're great ideas technically, but the focus is on polishing some of those skills and understanding what the innovation process is that perhaps as in a technical degree as engineering, perhaps they're not stressed as much as the technical side. In my experience as a graduate student, I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and they had the Change the World Challenge competition. And myself and my partner, we had a bunch of ideas at the lab, but we didn't have that gauging mechanism to understand if our ideas could actually become innovation. And the Change the World Challenge competition gave us the visibility that the ideas were great. We had some initial funding, but we also had the training as to what was important, right? How do you sell your idea? How do you identify a
Mhm.
market? Things that not necessarily engineering students are exposed to. And that's something that we are doing at the University of Puerto Rico through these competitions and through course projects, to help to aid in that transformational innovation that's required for the industry.
Yeah. And, and Sheila, I can appreciate well how in your unmanned systems engineering focus, in the work that you're doing at Puerto Rico, you are facing that need to have a transformational mindset that is going to be very different use of airspace. So I can see how all of that fits together. That's great. So, John, what do you? Any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, so uh, I don't think I mentioned in my background. So I'm a flight instructor. I flew UAs and Blackhawks for the Army, but fixed wing. I've been in single engine, multi engine airplanes, and both been a provider of the airspace industry and capability, and been a user of it. So one of the things that I've been an instructor for almost 30 years, and I'm a standardization instructor for the Cirrus aircraft company part time. Uh, Most people are familiar with Cirrus if you're around aviation and you think about the parachute. And that's probably, I get to hear Dale Clapmeyer, who founded the company, talk about how they got to the current Cirrus aircraft and the CAPS system, the Cirrus aircraft parachute system. Actually, last week I spent 3 days with the company in a standardization sales service and training meeting. When you look at the innovation or the parachute integrated with the aircraft, to date, I think the numbers are pretty close. 126 saves, 258 survivors. There's a few babies in there that were unborn, so they like to throw that in the graphic every once in a while. A few dogs. So anyway, I mean that system alone has just completely changed the way aircraft safety. And it's funny to listen to the story. He told the story. His wife didn't want to fly to their relative's house because she didn't feel safe or comfortable. And so in his design criteria, he wrote, "My wife must feel safe and comfortable when we get to the product that we're trying to design." And the other piece of it was the caps. The Cirrus parachute wasn't designed into the original design. His brother, some people may know the story, but his brother actually had a midair where he was taken off into the sun, and somebody crossed the departure end of the runway, and they collided. And the other person actually perished in the accident, and his brother was able to land the aircraft. And he said, "We should have a system that prevents people from dying in these situations." And so then they added the parachutes to the system. So it's your limitation is your ability to create ideas and to be creative. So I would say as much innovation as we can bring into the industry is the only way we're going to really change it radically.
Beautiful. So let me throw out something else. And again, listening to both of you and the very diverse backgrounds that you have, Shayla, your your focus now in your career is aerospace. You're a mechanical engineer by background. Uh,
Correct.
Johnny talked about the flight instructor and an aviator, leading to your safety theme and your systems ops. Um, when you think of the challenges that we face in terms of the problems we have to solve, um, and the convergent nature of the community we want to bring together to solve those, how do you think that that kind of diversity of thought supports progress in aviation? Is it important to have mechanical engineers working with double E's, working with physicists, working with aero folks to solve our complex challenges? And can we get the best ideas going that way? Any thoughts from either of you on that?
Shayla, you go first.
Yeah. If you ask me, that's critical, and that's actually at the core of most of the academic activities that I lead right now in terms of curriculum development and strengthening. So as I mentioned, I'm a board member of the Puerto Rico Technology Aerospace Consortium. That's a group of all of the key players in the aerospace ecosystem in Puerto Rico, and I support, of course, the academic side. And through my exposure to different aspects of the industry, not only private industry, but um, NGOs, government, there is a need for interdisciplinary collaborations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe we're at the point where if you have a degree in mechanical engineering, it's pretty well known that you will have the expertise in certain areas. And the areas of opportunity right now are in training. I'll say our students, because that's the segment that I work with, but training students so that they know how to communicate with other disciplines. Just as an example, we are developing curricular sequences as part of the minor in aerospace sciences and engineering. Our students in mechanical engineering take courses in propulsion. I teach those two courses. And it's great that they know how propulsion works, but can you talk to a software engineer that's developing software or is performing a verification and validation? And can you communicate the importance of the parameters that you're working with, and vice versa? And perhaps that's still an area of opportunity. And what we're doing is developing these interdisciplinary curricular sequences to make sure that a mechanical engineering student takes courses in software engineering, not to the extent that they become experts, but that they can collaborate and they know how to communicate. One other aspect that we're working on is through projects as well. In Turbo Lab, we this year is the first solicitation for a project-based program where we provide funding to our professors to work on interdisciplinary projects. And there's diversity not only in terms of disciplines, but in terms of the knowledge that students bring. So there's students not only from the College of Engineering, we have students from psychology, we have students from the Department of Agricultural Sciences, bringing different perspectives and learning how to use the tools that they would eventually need when they go out into the aerospace industry and become members of the workforce.
Great. John.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in. Yeah, absolutely. I think I would just follow on with a lot of the same comments, but you need to you need to be an expert, or at least build your base in one of the disciplines. You need to understand the other disciplines. The only way you're going to get to the higher TRL levels or technology readiness levels is to become a systems thinker, a systems integrator, and then I think the other foundation that you get in any one of the engineering curriculums is the problem solving, and your ability to take a problem, understand it, and then attempt to solve it. And let's see, the other thing I would say is listen to your stakeholders, listen to your customers for the system. You can take it so far, and you'll think 90%, they'll take it the other 100, 110%. I can remember when we were deploying the SMA Technical Excellence Program STEP at NASA, we created pure disciplines. It was quality, reliability, software assurance, system safety, and occupational. And the quality and reliability were so close to each other that they would say, I don't want to take all of these courses in my discipline. I want to have the opportunity, because I work in reliability also, to take a few courses in reliability. So we created electives in the system, right? And if you look across most curriculums, they have some electives in there. And so we actually opened it up to the entire suite of modules that were in the entire STEP program. So you had like 200 electives that were actually really focused in whatever topic we were trying to cover in that module.
Beautiful. So, folks, I want to go to a question that has come in the conference IO from our audience. And I'm going to put a little bit of a twist on it. I mean, you two in your storied careers have seen examples where you've driven innovation or have witnessed innovation being driven into the system or into your fields. What do you see in your students or colleagues that served as inspiration for them to provide that successful innovation? Are there characteristics of the people or the environment that leads to innovation that come to mind?
Yeah, so for students, for instance, currently, right, I've been a professor for 9 years, so I've basically been teaching students from the same generation, and there's a lot of motivation which might be different perhaps from before. There's a lot of motivation from trying to solve a problem that not only affects them, but trying to change the world, trying to change something bigger, trying to leave an impact. I see that very frequently among students. There's a sense of I want to achieve this, not necessarily because it's my inclination or because I'm technically savvy in this area and I found this great idea while I was conducting research, but more as an actual exercise to innovate in something where they can leave a footprint. They're very concerned about how what's their legacy and how they will leave the world. So there's a lot of that on the innovation that I see now among students. In terms of what would need to happen to foster innovation, again, I mentioned to me, no, even though it can be isolating, it's a social process. You need that openness to have innovation. Of course, you also need that alone time and that quiet time so that you can process the idea. But the brainstorming and fostering that collaboration among students, how do we do that? For me, teaching students to work in teams through project courses, not only research. And I should say that at our institution, most of our students participate in what we call special projects or extracurricular projects that sometimes lead to either national or international competitions. And that has been something that has sparked a lot of innovative ideas among our students, even in the area of aerospace.
John.
I think for me, it's everybody that I'm around, and we've got quite a few folks in the company now and in the industry, and they're just passionate about what they do. Whatever aspect of the system they're working on, they're very passionate about it. I'll see folks in the break room playing ping pong with each other, and they'll be from different disciplines. They'll play chess, so they socialize at work, and and then I think back about, I can remember I'll date myself a little bit here, but I wrote my first term paper was robotics, and it was on a typewriter. Today with just the speed of innovation, crowdsourcing, social media, when it's used to the good side, it's phenomenal. And what you can do as an individual with an idea, or some innovation that you really want to try to. The first thing I would say is, protect your IP, but the only way you're really going to leverage it and take it to where it needs to go is to get others involved.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that I see as a very significant challenge. I mean, um, sometimes I worry that even some of our folks at NASA um, believe that they've got a great idea. They know they've got a great idea. It's making progress, and I think they deal with sometimes a sense of scarcity. This may be the only great idea I have, so I want to kind of protect it and foster it myself. But I think
Right.
what you're both bringing forward is the fact that including others in maturing that idea, improving and advancing that idea, is where the incredible value can be of making even more out of it than maybe your initial brilliance brought to the opportunity. So I think there's very social engagement, making sure that we are including others in that diversity of thought, if you will, diversity of backgrounds that's allowing us to think differently, is a huge opportunity here that we want to make sure that we're fostering and developing in our students and our processes. Um, so, building on that a little bit, um, we've got to set an environment. John, in your role in the company, you need to set a culture and environment where we're going to get the best out of your product teams and development. Shayla, certainly from your academic perspectives, how do we establish an environment people are willing to share and learn and engage in diverse teams and diverse projects? Uh, what do you think we need to do better or differently? Are there barriers that we may be facing that is keeping us from getting the best value out of these diverse teams? What examples do you have in your workplace or in your university, Shayla, that will allow us to make this most conducive environment for innovation?
Yeah. Um, um, there's certainly a list of things that we can continue working on to um, foster innovation. Um, I think that as I had mentioned previously, it needs to be a culture change, right? So typically, and I would say unfortunately, innovation is seen as a side project, right? As my pet project. I have my daytime job, and then whenever I have some time, I would work on this project. And yes, sometimes institutions confirm that there's a want for innovation, but you need to put your resources where your mission or your vision is. So, allowing innovation, that is providing the resources, allowing the time for innovation. Uh, Again, sometimes innovation is seen as a side project, as an extra, not necessarily what needs to be done as part of your job. And perhaps changing that, perhaps encouraging when an idea comes up so that they can continue working on it and it's not seen as an outsider. I think, and again, this is my field, education is key to me, making sure even, and I would say college years and even before that, introducing the innovation process to our students so that they know, once I have an idea, what would I need to do. I know John Marinaro mentioned a few minutes ago that yes, we need to share our ideas, but we need to protect the idea as well. So sometimes people have great ideas and they're sometimes closed to the idea of sharing what they have, as you mentioned, Kavlowski, because this is my only great idea and I just want to protect it. And that certainly disrupts the innovation process. So we need to make sure that uh, uh, people know that you have an idea, there are mechanisms for you to protect it. There's ways to, what's the path to innovation? Once I have an idea, what do I need to do next, right? There's these programs sponsored by the National Science Foundation, the ICOR programs. I was a part of it a few years ago, that teaches you uh, what the commercialization process is. Once you have an idea, what's the next step?
Mhm.
How do you understand your market? How do you start having your minimum viable product? So there's a list of things. There's actually a recipe that you need to follow, but most people don't know, and that hinders on the innovation process, because of trying to protect it. Then it's not used. It doesn't become available to the rest of us.
Yeah. So, Johnny, I anticipate you may have a little different perspective on that, but maybe not. So, please, what are your thoughts on this?
No, I think I'll follow on a little bit of what Sheila was saying, but a couple of things that you have to think about, particularly if you're in research and development or innovation, innovating products. At the end of the day, you have to pay for it somehow. So whether you have federal funding or you have funding from investors, the big thing that I see, and I've seen it in the autonomous vehicle community, is we're seeing consolidation. We're seeing folks go out of business. And what happens is they consume all of their resources or their investment before they get to a product. So at the end of the day, and there's startups, they have no revenue, they spend a lot of money. You have to be responsible and accountable, and you have to think about your research or your development as a business. And I see that in the community a lot, that there's a huge disconnect between the engineering teams and the business side of the business.
Mhm.
I see the executives focused on the business, but that accountability has to go all the way, from the bottom to the top, and from the bottom to the top, and the top to the bottom, or vice versa. I just look back at Torque, and if you got time for about a 2-minute story,
Please.
Torque started as they started the company in 2005 as a group of Virginia Tech graduate students that had, graduated and got together, and they were all centered around the same thing of robotics. Then the DARPA Challenge came into view, and in 2007, Torque and the new group of Virginia Tech grad students came together, and they entered the DARPA Challenge. They ended up finishing, or can say we now, ended up finishing third behind Stanford, and I'm trying to remember the other team.
Carnegie Mellon?
I think it was Carnegie Mellon. Yeah, exactly. And just in front of MIT. So not too bad for a group of grad students that were trying to foster their passion.
Yeah.
Out of that, they got a $500,000 stipend. They use that to really, propel the business. They focused on saving lives through defense technology at the time. That was the mid 2000s. Afghanistan and Iraq were kind of in full gear, and we were losing soldiers to the improvised explosive devices, and the robotic technology could theoretically, help reduce the loss of lives and to transport, equipment and things like that. From there, they just continue to, focus on the mining and the defense industry, go to CES every year, and then ultimately were discovered by Daimler and Daimler Trucks North America at CES. And Daimler asked us to focus on trucks and have a pure play, and to, let everything else go. We entered into that relationship. They bought a majority stake in the company, and here we are today. But at the same time, there was a lot of making sure that we were focused on the bottom line all along the way, that we could keep the company viable and to continue to progress. So, a lot of things don't happen overnight. It may take 5 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 years. So I think it's a little bit of patience, but I'll go back to business and accountability and responsibility.
Beautiful. Folks, I got a question. I'm sorry, I'm looking over to my my left here to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on the conference IO, a lot of fabulous questions are coming in, more than we're going to have time in this hour to discuss. But there is one, you have touched on it a little bit, but I want to read it again because I like it so much. It says, "Our world is filled with so many issues and problems. How does one go about finding purpose or fulfillment in solving them?" I know both of you are dealing with younger engineers or students. Their passions are coming out much more so in their choice of academic and their careers, whether it be the environment or safety or whatever. How would you go about answering that question? Again, it's how does one go about finding purpose or fulfillment in solving those big problems that we've got?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to make sure that you do what you love. Um, Technically, yes, my background is as a mechanical engineer. I worked in industry for a few years. I love conducting research on the technical side, but I love education. I love mentoring. That's my passion. That's my driver. So as an academic, and I do see myself as, as an innovator, not only on the technical side, but on the administrative side, on how we look into changing the way things have been done for years, decades at my institution, and trying to find different venues to procure funding. How do we strengthen those, perhaps because of my background or my experience in industry, trying to merge those two sides, right? Industry and academia are very different, timelines are very different, the incentives are very different, the motivators are very different. So what I find myself doing is merging those two, right? Trying to academia is typically slower paced. So why we've been successful in some of these initiatives is, yes, we're slower in some of these aspects, but let's try to find a middle ground, right? Let's try to expedite some of those things of these things so that we can meet the milestones that industry wants us to meet, and we can continue strengthening these collaborations. um at the end, why do I do all of this? Because it's my passion to serve my students, because I want to leave uh, m- uh, a mark on the experiences that my students have, because I find immense satisfaction when I get an email from an alumni saying, "Hey professor, you know that class that you taught me, I'm using this right now," or that little story that you mentioned when you were doing testing in the wind tunnels, I'm doing that right now and this helped me. So I find immense satisfaction um, in those things. Um, and I think I'm able to be successful in what I do because I'm passionate about it. And in all of the semester in my evaluations from my students, and it's funny, um, evaluations to professors are anonymous, but I get a lot of passion in the comments. So she's a very passionate lecturer, she's very passionate about the topics that she teaches, and I am. So how do you find purpose? Think about what makes you smile, what things you like to do, and try to find ideas that align very well with those areas, and I can assure you that success will come.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I would say the same, a lot of the same things. Again, start with what gets you excited. If we're motivated, then we're going to go do great things. If you're frustrated or you really don't enjoy what you're doing, pick something else.
Yeah.
You're wasting your time. Life is precious. We only get the day. Today we only get once, and so, but we've got tomorrow. Change your direction if you're not happy with it. I'd say that. But then, coming back to a little bit of the accountability, start with the end in mind, right? That's what Franklin Covey tells us. So where do you want to be and where do you want to get to, and make it realistic. Don't make it so challenging that, unless you just want to spend a career focused on something that you want to try, and I would say go for that. But if you really want to get something done, then start with something that's a realistic to achieve in the amount of time you want to achieve it. Um, don't be perfect all the time. 80% on time better than 100% late. If you try to make everything perfect, you'll never get there. And I see that a lot. I need to make one more line of code change before we go out and test it. Okay. But you've only got so many of those in you for the amount of time that you're, funded. Coming back to that, I'll go back to a few more leadership things, right? Cliches, but the urgent and important. Stay focused on what's urgent and important. The other things you can get to later. So, that's the way you're going to get there from here. But as far as trying to pick, making it, pick what's important to you, what gets you excited, what difference you want to make. Do you want to make something a little better? Do you want to, invent something? You have to figure that out, and then you can go do it.
I want to add something in reading the comments in the chat.
Yeah.
So there's some disagreement on the advice, and I want to point out my message.
Please.
Right. As a researcher, I could work at my current institution, and technically and in terms of abilities, I would use the same abilities here or in many other career choices, right? But and John Marinaro did mention something about getting frustrated, and I want to assure you that I do get frustrated, even though I'm really passionate about what I do. But even when I have the abilities to perform the job, do you know what gets me through those frustration moments? It's the passion to get up again, to show up the next day. I do get very frustrated very frequently, and I just find new ways to complete my mission because I'm passionate about it, because I'm committed to what I'm doing, because it's my passion. So yes, abilities are important. I don't want to minimize on the importance of abilities, but once you identify your abilities, then just follow your passion.
No, understood. And I did as well read that comment in the chat. And I think they really need to go hand in hand. I don't know that there is the one that is preeminent, whether it be abilities or passion. The folks that realize the greatest success in their lives, the greatest satisfaction in their lives, are those that are able to merge what they're good at with something that they are truly passionate at. And I think that Shayla, perhaps you've made a really great choice for yourself, talking about your students and what they take away from their engagement with you, and how that shows and it gets you some of your tough places and your frustrations that you shared. So, and John, I was taken earlier in your comments about how you were talking about from your system safety part of your background, and how you were focused at times on not just making sure that you were driving safe practices and opportunities, but sharing that. You talked about breaking up the training and the classwork into things that are digestible, that can be put into our internal training system, and sharing that. So clearly, teaching and spreading the word is an important part of the way you've led your career as well.
Yeah, I worked for, I don't know if there's anybody on here that remembers Bill Jackson, but I worked for a gentleman named Bill Jackson. And Bill was a graduate of Virginia Tech, happened to be a co-op during the Apollo days, and got to work as part of the moon landing when he went down to Johnson as a co-op. Then he came back and he rewrote he wrote what's called the heading alignment software for the shuttle. When it does the heading alignment, when it comes in and lands at the Cape on the glide. But Bill, one of the things I remember Bill telling me when I was a young leader was that when you look at your career, you can break it into thirds. We spend the first third learning, we spend the second third, doing, and we spend the last third teaching and leading. And so that's kind of how I look at it. Yeah, you definitely we need people to teach. That's the only way folks learn. You can learn. I don't know. I'm amazed at what the young folks have today as resources to learn. Like if I had that, I was pretty passionate about learning. I could just see myself learning 10 times more than I ever learned with the encyclopedias I could get on the bookshelf in the library. Yeah. But yeah, so I teach airplanes. I don't teach airplanes to make money. I was just at a conference where a whole bunch of people, that's their business. I teach it to try to give back to the community to make it safer and to transfer lessons that I've learned along the way that hopefully folks won't have to learn that might prevent might save their life or save someone else's life somewhere down the road.
No, very, very fabulous. That's great. Thank you. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and boy, I mean, there are a couple of threads that I would love for us to pursue, but not sure we have enough time for all of that. I mean, I love this most recent thread on learning. Um, when I think of learning, I think of making mistakes and learning through those mistakes. One of my favorite quotes from a coaching legend, John Wooden, out of UCLA from many years ago, was the admonition to his team that you weren't working. It wasn't that you weren't working hard enough, but you weren't making your mistakes fast enough, because he really see that learning is critical from when you have failed, and then how you pick yourself up and get better. So I kind of sense that theme in terms of what you were all saying as well, that those learning efforts are critical. We will make mistakes as we do that, but it's vital to the improvement. But let me finish with one last question, and again, I'm going to go back to the conference IO, and if you could kind of share within the last few minutes here, what would your advice be to a person with an innovative idea, and that they don't necessarily know what to do with it? How do you would advise people that have something innovative, but need some guidance in terms of making it real? So in the last few minutes we've got here, if each of you could take just a moment maybe to share that, it would be great.
So I think for me, big thing is have a mentor. Find somebody that you know and you can trust, and that really has kind of been there, done that before, if possible, or a set of mentors if you need that to get everybody that get all the capabilities you need to advise. But have a mentor, trust your mentor, consult with your mentor. And the other thing I would say is just the power of a team. One person can do one thing, a team can do many. So keep that in mind.
Beautiful. Thank you, John. Kayla.
Yeah, I would say, and again, I always picture these questions coming from, I don't know, students. There are mechanisms to, and I don't want to say teach, because it's not like you can teach how to get an innovation to fruition, but that teaches you a roadmap as to what the steps are. There's a program by the National Science Foundation. It's called the I-Core program, where it teaches you, and that's for the early stages of an idea, how successful is the idea, and if there's a market need. You interview potential customers. So it opens up your eyes to things that you need to account for. As Marinaro mentioned before, it opens your eyes also to the fact that you would eventually need to sell that, and that you would need funding for that, right? Do you convince investors? Where can you find investors? How do you sell your idea in a convincing way? So there are mechanisms that do that. Academic institutions also sometimes offer courses about entrepreneurship. I want to mention quickly, at the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, we have the New Venture Design Experience, courses taught with professors from business administration and engineering to teach our students the innovation process. So if your students perhaps look in your institution for these types of programs, or identify resources as to how to go through the innovation process, it's not, it seems like something obscure, but there's a path to it.
True. Shayla, John, boy, this was so much fun. Thank you for joining me in this conversation, joining imaginAviation. I think this was just a fabulous panel to kick off our 3-day event with. Again, many thanks for your contributions here. And I want to wish you only the best as you go forward with your students and your programs, Shayla, in Puerto Rico, and John with your innovations and bringing autonomy to the roads in safe and effective fashion. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
You bet. So now what I want to do is I want to